Hello everyone, I'm Leo Costa. Welcome to Leo Costa TV. Four and a half years ago, I had 3 strokes in 3 weeks that left me paralyzed on my right side. Doctors have called me a miracle, simply because of how well I've recovered. But it goes way beyond that. Stroke recovery statistics in the US are abysmal, to say the least. When you consider that 800,000 people a year are having strokes and only 10% of those are making a 100% recovery, that means that 90% of the rest are living with a lifelong debilitating impairment. And it doesn't have to be that way. There are reasons, including inconclusive and confusing information. In addition, those who are involved, including insurance companies who prematurely terminate coverage even when full recovery hasn't been attained. Doctors and caregivers who are either unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the effectiveness of non-traditional therapies. And then you have the stroke victims themselves who don't know what to do when an event like this happens to them. The main objective of our program is to create awareness and educate for the sole purpose of preventing strokes and to help people reach their 100% recovery. Welcome to our program. And the doctors, they came in and they took all these tests on me and they said, "Hey, why are you even here? You shouldn't be here." I was 2 months away from the biggest competition of my bodybuilding career. Come on.
Big, scientific fact.
That's all I need.
Strong stuff for you, Leo. Delts and back.
At the time, I was living my life at very extreme levels.
This one, go. Ready? Go. Yeah. It's your body, man. Nice.
And we're saying, no, we're going to take pain by the throat.
Fight harder! Go! Drive the drive!
That's when the unthinkable happened. I had 3 strokes in 3 weeks that left me paralyzed. I had my stroke December the 27th, 2012. I was training clients in one of my studios when this happened. I had, my foot was on top of a bench. I had my hand holding myself up, giving direction to the client I was training. And then next thing you know, something went through my body that was really unexplainable to me. But at that point, I didn't really know what was going on. I just, I thought it was like some kind of a virus, you know. I mean, I certainly didn't think that I was having a stroke, for sure. It felt like, in the way that my body was losing function, the best way to describe it was like dominoes falling, because it started at my foot and my leg and then just traveled up my body. I lost function in my leg, I lost function in my hand, my motor skills, and in the way that I was talking. Even my eyesight. At that point, I wasn't scared. I think my mind I think back about that, it was I was probably in survival mode, and I didn't have time to be afraid. I was just responding to what the heck was going on, and no, I was not scared. The most shocking thing was the fact that I was an athlete. Once I did find out that I had a stroke, it was like, how in the world does this happen to me? Not only at that point, I mean, I was bodybuilder, you know, the best shape of my life to some degree, athlete. I was teaching people how to get in shape, and here I was, paralyzed in a bed in the hospital. Shocking. They took me in, and I immediately, they did some more testing to verify that, in fact, I had the strokes, and I did. And then they gave me an option. They said that if I could take it was a kind of a controversial procedure they did at this time. This has been 4 years ago. And it was a clot-busting medication that they gave you in an IV. Doctor said if it worked, then in 2.5 days, I would walk out of the hospital like nothing ever happened, which is exactly what did happen. But they did say that if it didn't work, I could die right there. I'm still in survival mode. I wasn't really sure. To be honest with you, I remember now, because one of my sons were there, and I was playing around. I mean, I couldn't talk very well, but I had a sense of humor. I don't know if that was just my way of dealing with what was going on, but I kept it light, and you know, I just never thought at that point that this would beat me, but I wasn't scared yet. No, but because of the fact that I was a bodybuilder, and you know, because of the sport itself, there's things that you have to do in order to compete at the level I was in. They automatically thought it was because of taking steroids, and that's what they thought. But because of later on, that was initially what they thought. But they did all this testing on me, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. Which was, for me, I'm not certainly condoning the use of steroids, don't get me wrong, but it's also important to know how it happened and why it happened. And, you know, the answers might not be what sometimes people want to hear. The reason I had my strokes was because of chronic stress at that time in my life. And I was training and competing for a big bodybuilding show. All those things were contributed. So, and certainly taking the performance enhancement drugs that I was taking at that particular time certainly didn't help the matter, but in itself wasn't the reason. It was the lifestyle that I was in at that point. I wasn't sleeping. I was almost 300 pounds in body weight, stressed out at work. I mean, it's just the chronicness of all the behavior I was in at that point. My third stroke happened 3 weeks to the day after my first two. Once again, I was training clientele, and this time I recognized what was going on. Even to the point I told my client, I said, you know, I got to leave because I'm having my third stroke. And once again, not advised, I got in my truck, drove to the hospital, and let them know about that. Well, they immediately took me, you know, to the back, and which I thought was crazy. They had me fill out paperwork, and after I finished filling out paperwork and I went to stand up, the very same thing happened to me as it did the last time. I was paralyzed, right-hand side, and this whole nightmare started all over again. The difference was, because of the fact that I had had the first two strokes 3 weeks prior, I was not now a candidate for the TPA. It was too soon. I had to wait 3 months. So now I was faced with, the unknown, and I had to let time take its course. Well, I was a little more concerned, obviously. I don't know. When you're like that, I was taking one step at a time. I don't think I was really scared. I was probably more scared than I was when I first went in, because some reality was starting to hit me. But my mindset has always been that, because I'm used to doing things that are hard, bodybuilding was extremely difficult. The hardest thing I've ever done to this day, besides rehabbing my stroke after the third stroke. So my mindset was, this is just another hard thing that I had to overcome.
I was at home, and he came actually in the house and was hanging on the wall, and he told me, I cannot walk anymore. I said, what do you mean you cannot walk? First I thought he makes a joke with me. Then I walked over him, and he said the half of his body was like paralyzed. So I said, okay, then I have to bring you to the chair. So first I panicked a little bit, and then he went on my shoulder with his 300 pounds. And we did it together, that he made it to the chair. And the good thing was, like a month before, my sister had a stroke, so I talked a lot to her husband, so that's why I recognized some issues with him. And I said, well, we have to call to bring you to the hospital. And he said, I don't want to go to the hospital. So I said, then I'm going to call your kids. Well, they have to know what's going on. Well, I thought it was really serious. Well, then the bad part was that the face was hanging down, but he started talking Portuguese. And I didn't understand that. I thought, well, that's not a good thing, right? So I called his son, Shane, right away. And he was there like in less than 10 minutes. And he said, yes, he has to go to the hospital. So let him bring him in the car, but we couldn't lift him up. He was too heavy. So that's why we called 911, and that's how he came in the hospital. I thought, shoot, I didn't sign up for this. But then I thought, I kind of did. I married him, so now I have to take care about him, right? So that's what I had to do. My job. I was at home again, and then actually he called me. And then, of course, I had to go over to the hospital. And I was kind of upset. Well, I said, well, this time you have to stick it out. Well, it's your own fault. Well, you didn't listen to the doctors. You didn't slow down. After 10 days, you went full power again. I said, then that's what you have to pay for now. Now you have to go to the whole stuff to, do all your exercises. And I mean, the first half year was very tough on him as on me. Well, I had to bring him on the shower. I have to help him. The hardest part for me was cutting his foot nails. I hated that, so I told him, I said, you know what, you better get yourself together and drive the car and let your nails down. Well, that's the only thing what I hate. But he was very good, to stubborn, and he learned very fast. And honestly, I had a lot of respect. After 3 weeks, I even cannot do it today. He started writing with his left hand. Well, he had to sign, like for the checks and everything for the business, and I couldn't do that for him, and I told him that. I said, you have to pull yourself together now. So I pushed him, and he pushed himself to get everything on track again. So it was hard, but it was a long way, but he all did it, right?
The thing is you have to have, it's like a training partner. When something like this happens to you, when you're training, you have to have somebody there that pushes you. But it's sort of a fine line, because if you push too much, or try to help too much, then you become an enabler. And then that doesn't do a person any good. But fortunately, Tina has an exercise background, And she knew, she was my training partner at that point, and they got the ball rolling. So it really helps when you have somebody there for you. That's true.
Yeah, well, I had to do what I had to do. And the most thing is that he was fighting for himself. And I couldn't exactly feel what he felt, but I thought, shoot, I won't be like that, you know, so you have to help. But on the other side, maybe sometimes I was a real bitch. Well, I told him, I said, you can do this by yourself, you know, in a short amount of time. Maybe it was a little bit bitchy. On the other side, I was just trying to push him that he has to do every time more and more and more by himself, you know, so that's how I was thinking at that time.
Well, it worked.
Well, they told me actually afterwards that his son signed up for, you know, for the 50%. I even didn't know that. And then he told me that after like 3 to 4 days. So my reaction to that was, I said, you know what? I really don't care. It's your life. When you want to sign up for 50-50, it's your life. The only one who can decide from, I want to do this, I want to die, or, well, I don't want to live like this, then it's his decision. And, you know, I probably would have signed that letter too, you know. Well, I still can understand. I would do exactly the same. I would take the shot too, even when I wouldn't have just 50%. But to going through where he went through now for 4 years, I understand that a lot of people are giving up, honestly, you know. So I'm very proud that he could do this and still can help a lot of other people to give them the courage to move on. Yeah, kind of. But in the back of my head, as I know him, I thought he's not going to sit around for 6 months. I thought in 1 week he's going to go back in the gym, and that made me mad. Kind of. And he knows that.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I know. Well, I thought, you know what, and I told him, and he was afraid. Well, I told him, and this stuff is happening again, I'm out of here. So he even didn't count on it, that I would stick with him for the next 4 years. And actually, I'm still around, so kind of lucky, maybe. Maybe not. So that's how it was.
Well, you know, the next time he was looking at me before I left the hospital, he says, I do not want you to go back to the gym for 4 to 6 weeks. And he had my full attention at that point, you know. And he was emphatic. He said, absolutely no more training, no more bodybuilding, none of that. Well, you know, that wasn't sitting very well with me, although after the third one, I knew I wasn't going to go back to the sport. I knew that. But in terms of training and all that, I was going to go back. But this time I was just going to follow doctor's orders, and I did. I waited 4 to 6 weeks before I went back to my gym. And then I started just slowly getting back to you know, to things. I had 3 weeks after the stroke happened, I had a physical therapy session that was scheduled for me. And I went to that, and it was the last time I went back, because it was obvious to me, and I know I'm not bagging or, you know, discounting any traditional physical therapy, but the way they were talking to me, their goals and my goals were different from one another, in that they wanted to get me functional, and I wanted 100% recovery, and that is a huge difference. If I hadn't had bodybuilding in my background, I probably wouldn't have done that. I probably would have gone to physical therapy, and I think on my own I just would have, you know, my tendency is to try to do more. I would have done that even with them, but I just made my own decision, and a controversial one, to do all my own rehabbing. I had paralysis from head to toe. And the most impaired part of my body was my arm and hand. It was dead. It was a weird sensation when I woke up one of the first times at home, and I didn't know where my arm was. I didn't know where my leg was either. And it was an odd feeling. I mean, I just sat there and I'm thinking, wait, this can't be happening.
I was looking on my side.
I was looking for my arm, you know. That was pretty shocking, you know. But I was, you know, to some degree, I was paralyzed from head to toe on the right-hand side. Hand and arm being the worst. Well, what I did is after going to my first rehab session, I realized that I was not going to do that just because of the fact that their goals for me were much different than mine. They wanted me to be functional, and I wanted to be 100% recovered. That is a huge difference. And so what I decided to do, which was a bit controversial, was I decided to do this myself. I had background in bodybuilding, which was a strong reason why I made that decision. And I've said it before that bodybuilding in many ways saved my life because of that. So I just decided to go home and start doing what's called body through space training. I didn't need exercises. I should say I didn't need weights to do exercises. I could do things, just normal things around my house. I just considered rehab was everywhere. It meant opening a door, opening a cupboard, you know. So I started there, even singing my ABCs. I mean, I learned about stuff like that, intuitive stuff like that, that in that case, for example, because I had developed a stutter from my stroke, it was a way for me to get past my stutter. So I tuned into that, you know, and I became very aware, even more aware of my body. I mean, it was very odd when I came home and I woke up one of the mornings and I had no clue as to where my limbs were. It was really strange. I was sitting there lying in bed thinking, where's my arm? You know, I had no clue as to where it was. That's an odd feeling, you know. And so at that point, again, I started rehabbing at home, and then it progressed from there because my partner at the time in business is also a chiropractor. And just so happened that he had been studying brain trauma and some non-traditional therapies that can be done for that. And that would apply to me because the stroke that I had was ischemic and it happened to my brain. So I started doing things like oxygen therapy, where you had the cannulas in your nose. And the whole purpose of that was to decrease inflammation in the brain. And I did the light strobe therapy, where I put sunglasses on. And there was a strobe in the right part of the lens that would hit me with a pulsing, sort of a pulsing tone. And it affected my left side. But all the stuff that I was doing was for inflammation. I also did music therapy. And I even did IV therapy, where I went to a doctor who was concocting an IV made from amino acids. I was taking glutathione, alpha-lipoic acid. These are solutions that specifically take out heavy metals out of the body. And the end result of all that is that if you need to get inflammation out of your body in order for you to be able to recover. If you're constantly inflamed, you can't recover. So if it wasn't for that, some of those therapies that I learned from my partner, you know, it might have been a whole different story. Moving my arm through space. In fact, Tina actually helped me do that. She would come in, and because I couldn't move my arm, so she would actually help me move my arm. And from bodybuilding, I knew that we believed in blind faith in bodybuilding, that the way to change the body quicker was to develop a stronger link between mind and muscle. I just used those very same techniques. And when Tina came in, I'd have her move my arm through space, and she did that for 3 weeks because we learned in training that once you do something for 28 days, 21 days in this case, then your body if it's going to adapt, it'll do that in that amount of time. And sure enough, about the 21st day, because she would come in every morning, And we would go through that process where she'd travel, make my hand go up and down, and I would just watch my hand. And I just kept doing that every day.
I bought you actually the smallest dumbbell that I ever saw. Remember that?
1 pound dumbbell.
I said,
Man,
there you go,
small.
big boy. And then the nice part was we had a bicycle on the table. So, but while he couldn't put his hand on it, so I took some duct tape and I taped his whole hand to that little wheel. And sometimes it was like cricket. Well, it fell off, so I came back. And then after so many weeks, we skipped it. Well, I think that thing is a pain in the butt, you know. So, but actually, he still does therapy today to day. When I'm in the kitchen today and I'm cooking and I'm standing for a cabinet where your shakers are, right? And I'm standing in front of it, he's standing there. He said, Tina. And then sometimes I forget and then I want to give him the shakers. He said, no, put them back. Okay. And sometimes I'm kind of like, okay. And then he opens the cabinet and he takes them out by himself. Well, he said, that's always still a part of my therapy. He's getting his own silverware. He's getting his own plate with food. You know, I mean, I put the food on it, but, you know, there are still things that he's doing it his way. And sometimes I think, my gosh, why are you doing that? But he is still in therapy, and I think he's going to be like that the rest of his life, honestly.
It is. It's when this happens to you, it's lifelong. You don't stop. You constantly have to be doing that.
It's like a little bit robot.
Well, and the thing about that is when you're trained like that, then you just do it. And again, the people that are your caretakers, and a lot of times it's your wife, they can be a really good thing for you if they motivate you, but with good intentions and them wanting to help you, sometimes they become an enabler. Like with Tina, she, it's got a good intention when she wants to get my shakers, as she's calling it, for me. But that's not, at that point, then she at some point, I will start taking the path of least resistance. And that is not good for therapy. Again, back in that all stems from bodybuilding, because when you are training for that sport, you have to be intuitive. You have to keep pushing the envelope and thinking about things that you can do to, in this case, in bodybuilding, is grow bigger muscle. And you have to do things that are non-traditional, including taking performance enhancement drugs. At times, you have to make that decision. But it stemmed from that. So with that being said, once I got to the point where my rehab at home that I did was, I needed somewhere else, I needed more. And this is one, just by chance, my training partner at the time, or my business partner, I should say, who also was a chiropractor, had been studying brain trauma and things that can be done for brain trauma, which included oxygen therapy, where they put a cannulus in your nostrils, and you have air being pumped into your body. The whole point of that stuff is to remove inflammation out of your body. When you have a stroke, it's like a massive attack of inflammation to your whole body. And depending on where it happens, like in my case, it was in my brain. So the oxygen was really good for my brain. It lowered the inflammation, and it allowed me to be able to recover. And that was the same way when I was doing training. So I understood that. In addition to that oxygen, I did music therapy. I did light therapy I had sunglasses. There were colored sunglasses, and there's a strobe in the lens on the right-hand side that would pulse. That pulsing would affect the opposite side of my brain because my stroke was on the right side, and so they had to treat the left side for that. But all of that was strictly for improving and reducing inflammation. I also did IV therapy, which was, again, this is stuff that's very non-traditional. In some cases, doctors don't even acknowledge this or discount it because they're not really sure about that. But I was taking amino acids in a cocktail that was, the two I was taking, it was glutathione, which is the mother of all antioxidants, and then alpha-lipoic acid. And again, that job of those aminos together was to pull out heavy metals out of my body that were causing problems for me. So these are all things that I did in addition to, when you're doing rehab, you got to keep adding more stuff in certain things because your body has a tendency of adapting, and you have to keep pushing along with that. I saw progress immediately. So the moment I got home, I was seeing progress all the time. Sometimes it was really little things, and I started appreciating those little things. You know, those are big things.
Especially the writing. You started writing your name in 2 or 3 weeks with your left hand.
Yeah, I mean, that was, you're talking about actually when I started noticing progress from my impaired side, but I also started noticing progress from my good side because it had to adapt in the meantime. This is part of your fight or flight system. So while I was, on my right side, I had to put a pencil through my fingers, and then Tina would wrap a tape around me because I couldn't hold on to anything, but that wasn't going to keep me from trying to write. Yeah, that takes a lot of discipline and determination to do that. But in the meantime, I had to learn how to write left-handed because we have a business. Things had to be, the show must go on. And I had to learn how to eat left-handed. And the funny thing is that I ended up, now years later, now I'm having to train my right side again to start doing the things that now my left side has learned how to do because it had to. This is how fantastic your brain and your body is. It will adapt if you choose to participate in that exercise because it takes determination and you got to keep going, moving forward. Everything. Mainly, all of a sudden I became emotional. My goodness.
Yeah, finally.
I became emotional, I could be watching, we were watching the Waltons. She likes to watch the Waltons. And of course, I'm home. And we're watching the Waltons, and next thing you know, I'm like bawling my eyes out at this Waltons movie. I mean, it's just crazy things like that. And at first, I'm sure, because it was weird, because crying made me feel weak because of the way I was raised. The thing is what I learned as I went along was because every time I was emotional that way, extra emotional, all of a sudden I noticed a couple of days afterwards, all of a sudden I made like this major breakthrough in my progress. It was crazy. And I thought at first it was just like, maybe I'm dreaming.
Well, it's very weird for the other person. Well, I thought, what the heck is with him, I thought he has something now in his brain too, or he starts crying with a children's show or something, Well, when we don't know anything about it, but after a while, you understand from what's going on in that brain. Well, it takes you a while till you recognize that, right? So.
Yeah, but so anyway, that it was my emotional state was the main thing, and I don't know. It like something like this that is that hits you at the core is life changing. It changes perspective. I know that even the way because of my personality hasn't changed that much. I still have an addictive personality. I'm an all or nothing type of person. But the thing that I've learned how to do better, it's a constant struggle, is I've learned how to channel that in different ways. For example, I have no way of competing again. I know that if I do that, it's going to kill me. But it doesn't change me. That doesn't change my personality. It's still there. So interestingly, what I've done now is I'm in process of writing a book for men's fashion because I found that there were similarities between men's fashion and training. And now the long and short of all the story and what I'm trying to tell you is that now I am exercising extreme behavior in, for example, teaching men how to dress as one thing. I am channeling my personality into, I realize now that the strokes happened to me because it was my bigger calling.
Oh yeah, well, I think Leo is a fighter and everything what he's doing. And it was sometimes good when I could be a little bit bitchy with him. Well, that gives him maybe he was thinking oh my gosh, there he goes again. I have to hurry up. I have to do it better. I don't know, maybe. But it's just, I didn't want that he sees the whole time that I actually didn't feel sorry for him. A lot of people, they're feeling sorry, and maybe I didn't want that he's going to think that I feel sorry for him. So sometimes I was like maybe a little bit hard on him that I wanted, but I think that's on one side was maybe good too. I don't know.
It was good. I mean, generally, I don't feel sorry for myself. I'm harder on myself than anybody, but she was right there making sure, you know, so it was, I had no worries about that.
A little bit mean sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of, but I didn't tell him.
Thanks.
Sorry. I just want that he's went on with what he's doing, and I mean, when I'm saying the whole time you're doing good, you know, then maybe they stop, so I thought he has to keep going, so I didn't say anything.
Because I had clarity. I didn't know where I was going with that book. That book was written in, not only did I go back to the beginning to figure out how in the world I got from an athlete to being paralyzed, but the way I wrote that was, it was all over the place, and I didn't know at times exactly what I was writing. I was just writing. I mean, she had a good idea, you know, to write stuff down. And at first I was just writing, it was more like a diary, I guess. And then like, as I was writing, then it's, you know, I'd have moments where I thought, well, maybe, but I just kept going with that, you know, I just decided, where I started getting some direction was when I decided to go back, and as a bodybuilder, you're very inquisitive, you're very interested in knowing about stuff to make your body change. So I just took that approach, and I just went out I'm going to start from the beginning. I went back and I remembered the first time I remember life, and that's from where I started. So then I wrote from that perspective, and then I threw this, the stroke was all a part of that, you know. But there were times where I would stop for months at a time because I didn't know where I was going. But as it was kind of these light bulbs that started coming on and going on. Because with time changes things when this first happens to you. And time keeps changing things for me because it gives you a different point of view, a different perspective, being more objective. And then the light bulb comes on. That's what we call writer's block. When you can't write anymore. And when it first was happening to me, it scared me. That probably scared me more than the stroke did in some ways. Because I didn't, you know, I thought that's it. And that somehow would tie into what was going on with me. But then I learned that was a writer's block. Because I wrote training courses. I never wrote something, this is considered more motivational or a novel type. It's a different kind of writing. And there were times that, so I would worry that nothing else would come through. But then I learned that it was just temporary. And you can't rush certain things. Certain things just have their own rhythm and tempo. And it's okay to have the will and to push forward, but you have to know when you got to back away. Percolate. And then all of a sudden it's like, some more stuff came. And then as I was writing, then all of a sudden I was like, now I got this. Now I know what I'm doing with this thing. That's how I ended up writing the book. That's why it took so long. Blown away. The thing about, it's really interesting that what that publishing company did for me mentally, because up to that point I'm thinking, okay, I wrote this stuff and she read it and some people that knew me read it and they said, yeah, it's really good. I'm thinking, okay, they'd probably say that because they know me. You know, why wouldn't they say that? You know, you hope that people will be honest with you, but you got to think that because they know you, they like it. You know, so I was really insecure about, I mean, I sent this thing to New York. Funny how I learned about where to send it is I just got up one morning and I always turn on the TV and a commercial came on. And it was like new authors, submitting new authors, send your transcripts here. And out of the corner of my eye, I caught the phone number, not even writing it down, but it stuck in my head. And just out of the blue, I thought, well, why not? All they can tell me is no, which is painful to hear. It's a form of rejection. But I sent it, thinking, well, about, I don't know, maybe within a month, I got word that they wanted to publish me and give me a publishing contract, that validation changed me forever, because all of a sudden, even if it's true or not true, the fact that somebody who didn't know me thinks it's good enough to give me a publishing deal, that changed my whole way of thinking. You know, I was once known for my bodybuilding and being big and competing at the world level and all that kind of stuff, national stages. And now, after this publishing company told me they thought my writing was good, again, you don't know how this still is going to end up on the market. It didn't matter. I think of myself as a writer now, and somebody who was known for my bodybuilding at one time in my life. Changed my whole life, changed my whole way of thinking and the way I work and do everything. So it was pretty amazing. The poor recovery rates, horrible. You know, 800,000 people a year. Here's where I saw the problem was this. There's 800,000 people a year in the U.S. that have a stroke. Okay, based on population, 3.5% of the people are having a stroke. That's not bad. And that's the reason why when I reached out to doctors and reached out to getting on television to, you know, get the message out about this recovery, what I had experienced, I wasn't getting anybody getting back to me. I couldn't believe that. Well, because I started focusing on the other side of that number. If you can do math, you realize that, here's the deal, only 10% of those 800,000 were having getting an almost 100% recovery. So do math. It means 90% of the rest of us, or the rest of the people, are living with a lifelong impairment. And here's the thing, that doesn't have to be that way. So all of a sudden it's like, what's going on here? And that's when I took the next step and said, okay, I want to go on the road and talk to stroke survivors and victims and find out what's going on. And that's probably where the biggest eye-opener was. Because as I was talking to those people, I started hearing things like, oh, my insurance company wouldn't cover me anymore. My doctor told me that this was all as good as it was going to get, that I should just settle. So I started hearing things like that. And it wasn't just at one or two places. It was everywhere. And then I thought, okay, well, I keep looking for a solution. I think there's idea people and there's solution people. I'm more of a solution person. So I thought, okay, so this is a problem. Here's a solution. I'm going to call the American Medical Association and I'm going to reach out to them and say, look, I'd like to come to your conferences. They have them all over the world. I'd like to come to your conferences and speak to your physician. I'll speak to anybody, but I'd like to speak to your physicians and tell them my story, and maybe it can help them. Because when I went to my cardiologist, he's asking me, how did you get yourself recovered like this? What is my doctor doing asking me that question? Worse yet, when I told him the answer, he looked at me like he was puzzled. Had no idea what I was talking about. So I started, all these dots start connecting. That's when I called American Medical Association. Well, the funny thing about that was, not funny, shocking, was they did not want me at their conferences. Not even, I told them I'll pay for my own way. I just want to come talk. Nope. Well, I started realizing that I was part of the problem and not the solution. See? I was the solution for this. And they saw me as a part of the problem, is what I'm trying to say. Not only them, but insurance companies. I'm still waiting to get a meeting with them. They won't talk to me. There's $34 billion a year being spent on health or stroke-related costs. I understand that, but when there's a better way, and I've proved it, I have people that I'm working with that are proving it, why isn't that being addressed? They're not looking at that side of the number. Then it makes me a skeptic. Then it makes me start thinking about maybe they don't want the cure. It starts making me think, because that's what things are leaning towards. If someone said, hey, look, there's no possible way you're going to get better. Okay, end of story. We're done. But that's not the case. And I do agree that less than 3.5% of the people having stroke, that's good. We got to fix this problem on the other side of that number. I think that I've come a long way. I've learned that, I always want more. That's just in my nature. I'm never happy. But at the same time, I pat myself on the back and say, you know what? You've done good, kid. But just don't get comfortable. Just keep, as Tina mentioned earlier on, I still do rehab every single day. I am not finished yet. And I'm about probably 99%. I mean, most people can't really tell, until I expose. But I know little things.
I think the only one who always can tell is me.
You can tell because you're with me most of the time. But it's so, you wouldn't know that. Just somebody who maybe is real close to me might pick up on it. Well, it was an extension of what I did with in my life as a personal trainer, helping people get themselves in shape. This is just a bigger stage, a different stage, a bigger stage, if you will. And I'm still in the same line of work. I'm just helping different people with different situations. People who have strokes, I didn't run across one stroke person who had the exact same stroke as I did. They were all different in some way. It's a very big obstacle. It's a very big elephant to take bites out of, But I like things that are hard. Bodybuilding, the reason I was attracted to the sport is because it was very difficult. The hardest thing I ever did was bodybuild until I had my strokes. Rehabbing from that, bar none. Toughest thing I've ever done because it beats on you every single day. I saw people whose hopes and dreams, I saw the life taken out of them, out of their eyes. I'm not going to be that guy.
I think he's doing pretty good, and I think a lot of people appreciate it, that he's trying to help other people with strokes. Not everyone is doing that. The only thing what I actually want to say, I'm very proud of him and what he's doing. I think a lot of people forget, and they should know, that they don't need their family to put them in the corner. They need the family to support them and to help them. And a lot of people, they don't do it. And that's a very sad story.
Well, a caregiver for me is the same as having a training partner. That's how I see it. And you need that support. There's no question about that. What you don't need is somebody that turns into an enabler, that does too many things for you. It's a tricky balance, is what I'm trying to say. And I can see because there's been times where she'll try to do things for me, or we'll get into it because of this. We butt heads because of this. And it's always based out of not really understanding. She doesn't really understand what's going on in my head still to this day. And it's hard to understand each other sometimes, but it's based all on good intention. But you need a support group. And that includes your family, like she's saying. It includes your family, it includes, close people around you. You cannot do this by yourself. If you think you can, you're out of your mind.
I had my bad times at the beginning, but afterwards I thought, well, I have to stick with it, and I'm a fighter too, actually, so I thought we have to go to this together. Or I could do two things. I could walk away, like a lot of people doing, honestly, while my sister works. Well, strokes are all over the world. My sister works with stroke people every day. And those people are actually in a kind of a home. So, and those people are by themselves. The family left them, the wife, divorced, kids walked out of it. They didn't know how to handle this. Those people, a lot of those people are all suicidal. It's very sad. That's what I'm saying. you need your family, your wife or your kids to stick with you. That's the main thing. And of how I feel at the moment or at that time, it doesn't matter. Well, I signed up for it, I married him, I have to stick with it, or I walk away and I stick with it. You know, like, everyone should do that, but not everyone can do it. That's the sad part. I would say think about how you guys met for the first day, or even when it's your son or your daughter from the first day that they were born. Just stick with it. It's your family, it's your blood, and or your best friend, or your husband, or your wife, or your daughter, or your kid. It doesn't matter who it is. I would say stick with it and fight for it while those people are going through hell. Even it's not easy for the family members too. It's hard for both sides, let's say it like that. But you have to stick with it. That's how I leave it.
I'm going to quote Winston Churchill. Never, ever, ever, ever give up. Because all things are possible. But you have to be the one that makes that choice.